If you look at here at my channel, for the past few videos, I've been discussing a lot about filmmaking. But today, we are gonna discuss about photography. Intro. Hello students and mga fellow creatives, and today we will discuss about landscape photography. Specifically about exposure bracketing. So first of all, what is landscape photography? Landscape photography is capturing photos of nature or the outdoors in a way of putting your viewer into the scene. Well, for me, landscape photography is putting the ordinary into something extraordinary. And now that we know the meaning of landscape photography, let's head on to our topic, which is exposure bracketing. So, what is exposure bracketing? First, I know that every one of us have had those moments where our photos are overexposed or sometimes underexposed if we want to expose for the highlights. But if we want to expose for the shadows, then our highlights will be blown up. This is when exposure bracketing comes to play in landscape photography. For example, this photo of mine right here, this photo should have been overexposed if I didn't use exposure bracketing. So now you will see that I have very good details in my shadows and at the same time very good details within my highlights. That is because of exposure bracketing. Exposure bracketing is a way of putting several images into one image. And yes, more of like a high dynamic range photo, but in a way that you create it yourself and not by the computer. So now let's discuss how do you do exposure bracketing. As for me, when I shoot landscape photography, I take 3 photos for exposure bracketing. 1. Exposing for the highlights. 2nd photo, exposing for everything that would look normal for the camera. And 3. Blowing up the highlights but exposing properly for my shadows. If you're gonna do this for the first time, I would advise you to use your histogram in order to know that your shadows or your highlights is properly exposed. But if you've done this already multiple times, you can just use your eyes to look at the screen of your camera and see if you're properly exposed or not. One thing to put in mind when doing exposure bracketing is to use a tripod. That's because you're gonna need it in the editing process. The editing process for landscape photography when it comes to exposure bracketing will be discussed in another video. And now that you know exposure bracketing, you don't need to buy those expensive cameras that would give you very high dynamic range to take this type of photos. Because even those cameras would need to do exposure bracketing in order to have a very perfect type of exposure for their landscape photos. Because there's no camera yet that I know that can do a very good dynamic range than our eyes. Our eyes has a very good dynamic range. Our eyes has the best dynamic range, I think, for me. But unfortunately, our eyes is not a camera. Okay? Okay, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button if you learned something from this video. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Comment down below for any content suggestions. And see you in the next video where we will talk about product photography. It's going to be a very, I think, long video, but it's going to be worth it. So, see you there. Thank you so much for watching. Don't hate, just create. Bye-bye.